Good afternoon, class. Thank you for visiting my final presentation for the class. The topic I chose to talk about is environmental security. Slide number 2. What is environmental security? According to our textbook authors to know, environmental security is described as the preventing of the physical environment that disrupts safety, environmental catastrophes that it could endanger people, buildings, etc. Snow also describes environmental security as dangers that lack imminency, controllability, or both. Therefore, environmental threats can take place without warning and cause a considerable amount of damage to buildings and important facilities, as well as a loss of lives. The difference between environmental threats and other threats are the randomness that takes place within environmental threats. Environmental threats do not design a plan for what or who it is going to attack. Anything in the way is subject to damage. The relationship between the environment and the security of humans and nature. This is quoted from the Institute for Environmental Security in describing what environmental security is. Some examples consist of global warming, hurricanes, tornadoes, and wildfires. Next slide, slide number 3. Specific types of environmental threats the United States has faced in the past are, and I'm just going to give you a few and give you a perspective of the amount of damage, lives lost, and how significant this threat was. So here are some numbers. Hurricane Katrina, $96 to $125 billion in damage, and over 1,800 lost their lives. The 2003 San Diego firestorm, 16 were killed, and 2,427 homes and businesses were destroyed. The Baltimore Tunnel Fire of 2001 disrupted the East Coast rail service and slowed down the internet everywhere. The Johnstown flood, also known as the Great Flood of 1889, $17 million in damage. But please note that the date in history and the money difference between then and now. And then over 220,000 lost their lives in the flood. Many of you may remember, I remember this a little bit, but I was younger when it took place. The blizzard of 1999, which was between January 2nd and January 4th, 1999. And most of the northern areas received between 18 to 22 inches of snow. Chicago, New York, and most of the northern cities and northern small towns up north. The serious impact on travel. Flights were canceled, roads were not accessible, schools and businesses closed. And there was also, I thought this was interesting, and you didn't really hear about it, and you really wouldn't think about this actually taking place, but there was also a nationwide blood shortage up in the north because many could not travel to hospitals to donate blood. And I just thought this was interesting because we did not look at this as a typical environmental concern. We see the blizzard affecting us, but we don't see the way travel, when people aren't able to travel, what that plays on businesses. And just like this instance with the blood shortage, I just would have never imagined of something like that happening. So next slide, slide number 4. It is important to look at these key actors because the high level of involvement that these members have, these are members of national security, have during environmental threats, and how important national security is during environmental concerns. So just some key names to point out is Colonel Terry J. Ebert, Director of Homeland Security and for the city of New Orleans. He was a high important actor during Hurricane Katrina. And then some federal officials consisted of Blum for the Department of Defense, Michael D. Brown for FEMA and for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and then also the Secretary of Homeland Security. And the duties of these key actors during Hurricane Katrina was to aid FEMA and other response groups in response and recovery in New Orleans and send in military personnel. So next slide, slide number 5. This chart displays the level of involvement the military had in aiding the efforts during Hurricane Katrina. And we have examined the involvement of national security actors during Hurricane Katrina because it is important to demonstrate the legitimacy of national security in terms of environmental threats and security. These actors play a predominant role already in environmental threats. So single-handedly, the two just go hand in hand. Next slide, slide number 6. The relationship between environmental concerns and national security. So this is where my argument is for that national security in relation to environmental security is legitimate and is helpful and is very important. So the active relationship. The two obviously have an active relationship because when an environmental threat or disaster takes place, the military, Department of Defense, and Department of Homeland Security are directly involved in aiding the response and recovery efforts. The example we saw of Hurricane Katrina clearly defines the relationship by the high number of members of the National Guard involved and the key actors in the case. The National Guard is also designed to immediately respond to disasters and environmental threats. They are among the first to the scene of the threat, along with the local police and the fire department. When hurricanes are being tracked and all that, the national security is called in before, or national security, the National Guard is called in before the disaster even takes place because they're creating plans and figuring out ways that they will respond after the disaster does hit. So next, it is important for maintaining security measures and capabilities because national security and environmental security is important because we have seen the considerable amount of damage caused by these disasters. Therefore, it is important for national security measures because the environmental threats can damage our systems and procedures for national security. For example, important facilities, weapons, and equipment can be damaged. Therefore, if they are damaged, then our national security efforts could be undermined. Because in one case, because in a case of another threat, like an attack by a terrorist organization, we may not be ready if our equipment was damaged by an environmental threat. Also, we saw during the blizzard of 1999 that roads, flights, and travel were ultimately shut down across the country. Therefore, for national security efforts, it could be hard to travel if an environmental threat and another threat took place at the same time. And then last, changing world, changing concerns, and traditional versus non-traditional concerns. Stop. Sorry, my dogs are playing in the background. Okay. Snow talks about this transition from traditional to non-traditional concerns. We cannot only focus on traditional concerns because the world is changing and evolving. Traditional concerns being threats of war and from other countries that we have traditionally seen in the past. Non-traditional concerns, environment being one of them, will continue to affect the United States and the world into the future. Therefore, it is important to adopt policies to ensure the safety of our country against those threats. We have seen national security measures change from countries to terrorists to border and environmental threats. The environmental threats will most definitely continue to the future. And then the Institute for Environmental Security says it best when it comes down to environmental security and national security. So just quoting them, environmental security is central to national security, compromising the dynamics and interconnections among the natural resource base, the social fabric of the state, and the economic engine for local and regional stability. And I just think that really wraps up the whole purpose that we need environmental security and national security measures together and the importance of both of them. So because of these three reasons, it is important to have environmental security in terms of national security to not only protect the lives of United States citizens and property in the United States, but to also ensure the United States is ahead of the game, meaning we are aware of the potential threats and have the proper precautions and agenda to plan for those threats. So thank you for visiting. I look forward to your response, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their summer and a happy 4th. Thanks.